Good day everybody, thank you for joining me on the channel. In today's content we break down the trajectory for XRP to reach double digits with targets towards $13 to $27. Do stay tuned, nothing that I say is financial advice. Let's dive into the content. So this is a chart that I recently shared on X, which is replicating a very similar move from XRP's 2017 cycle breakout in 2025. Now, the way that I managed to analyze and predict these targets of double digits towards sort of $13 to $27 is by using Fibonacci extensions. Now, we're going to start with this 2017 cycle, in fact, going from sort of October 2013 all the way up to the previous all-time high of January 2018. Now, what we actually had is a certain level of range highs. So from this local low in January 2017, retracing back to this wick high in October 2013, there was the 1414 and 1618 fib extensions that XRP needed to meet. Now, you can see on the month of April 2017, right here, we had this wick, okay, up to the 1618. So if you scroll across, you'll see that 39 cents was tapped. And at this point, over the next couple of months, XRP corrected, okay, from this wick going into sort of July around 77%. Now, after this 77% correction, we did see a juicy rally up towards the previous all-time high of about a 36 to 35x. Now, at this point, when we did sort of run up to the 1618 and pull back, that vicious breakout took about 9 months, okay? And it ran up to the 2.272 and very close to the 2414 fib extension. You can see that the previous all-time high kind of sat bang in the middle of these targets, but nonetheless, the 2.272 was met. Now, fast forward to 2025, in fact, going from 2018 all the way up to current sort of prices, in relation to actual structure, going back to this cycle, you can see that we had this symmetrical triangle, which initially led to that crazy euphoria. In this cycle, going from the previous all-time high, we've been in a similar structure, okay? And this pattern or formation took around 7 to 8 years, okay? So it was a longer durational period than the previous symmetrical triangle. In fact, just to get a rough sort of estimated time period before the initial major breakout, this was about 1,370 days. If we go from the previous all-time high until we initially got the breakout, this took around 2,465 days, okay? So the longer you actually coil up in these periods, the larger the breakout is likely to be. Now, in regards to actual structure, you can see that I've got these sort of circle and oval shape replications here. And it does look like, again, looking at this cycle here, once this resistance block was broken, there really wasn't anything in the way of stopping XRP reaching extensive euphoria and price discovery. And this is where we got that whopping move. Fast forward, okay, you can see that we actually got the breakout of this triangle in October 2024. And it's been 3, 6, 9, 12, about 15 months where XRP has been surging, placed a new all-time high, and is currently, for the last sort of 3, 6, about 9 months, you can see that we've had this wick down towards $1.59, $1.60, and this wick has brought us back down to this red resistance block, creating a flipped SR, which is basically where you turn previous resistance into support. Now, within doing this, this is what I think is creating the base, okay, and why I think we're in this sort of red circle here, consolidating for a couple of months before we get this extensive euphoria. Just like we did in this red circle in the past, in sort of between April 2017 until October, we actually had some price consolidation for a few months before initially getting that final blow off top. Okay, so again, these are 3-month candles, high Kaneshi candles. These are very long time frame periods. But again, when you zoom out, when in doubt, you just zoom out. And at the moment, XRP is sitting above its previous resistance block and has been for sort of about 9 months. So with this being said, and even with the largest liquidation event in history, XRP is still managing to hold a key level of support. Now, just for reference, if we go back to this 1618 high from 2017, this correction was roughly around, as we said, about 77%. This cycle, okay, since when we topped out at the all-time high, XRP and the wick drawdown has brought us down about 57%. So there is a possibility that we could still, over the next couple of months, pull back if we was to pull back, let's say, for example, roughly around the same sort of price drop, about a 74-75% correction, this would still remain a potential bullish scenario because we have these highs here from April 2021, and this area could also act as a potential flipped R scenario. So even if XRP does for the next few months have a nasty retracement, maybe another flash wick, again, I don't see it happening, guys, but there is a potential. This would still validate a potential move to push up to these targets of around $22 to $30, okay? And $27 is my prime target. But as we're saying here, looking at Fibonacci extension targets, if we're going to replicate something like the previous Fibs, okay, so all of these Fibonacci's were met, bar the 2414, okay, that was just shy in the previous cycles. Looking at this cycle's range highs, we're looking at about $4 to $6. And at this point, this is a very interesting area because if we do sort of get a pullback in this range, I think holding above sort of $6 to $4 would indicate that we're looking for that final euphoric extensional push. Now, again, these are the targets for this cycle. The 1414 sits at around $4, which I think would be XRP's next euphoric move up once it decides to where it finds this sort of local low. $6 is also an area which I would expect resistance. Okay, this sort of structure points to a major breakout towards 11, then pulling back to $6 before that initial euphoria. However, I do think there will be some strong resistance at the 1618 range high, okay, which again, as I said, I think is the next move that XRP is looking for, between $4 to $6, and then consolidate a little bit more before initially getting that final euphoric push. So just keep that $6.40 in mind right this second, because what we're going to do is look at another chart for XRP right now, which is, if I go to normal candles, we're going to go to the weekly time frame and zoom in a little bit here. Now, why $6 is an area of interest to me is because going from this wick low that we had in early October, going from this wick low back up to, in fact, we need to get it up to this all-time high. So from the wick low to the all-time high, you will see that the 1618 sits at around $6.60. So that kind of ties up with our previous chart where we was looking at the Fibonacci extension, the range highs at $6.40. So again, just zooming into the weekly here, it does look like XRP is in this sort of channel. Okay, or in some sense, I think it's building an ascending flag structure where we've got a level of support, this ascending level of support, and we have this ascending level of resistance. And you can see I've got this structure on here. XRP, when it ran into resistance, had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waves down, which created this level of support. At this point, there was an A, B, C, which ran us back into resistance. And right now it looks like, again, we're going through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if XRP fails to sort of break out of around $2.60, which is a key level of resistance at the moment, you can see these sort of highs from back in May and March of 2025. You can see that XRP is sitting under this level of previous resistance. So this could be a strong area to see rejection. And if we do come back down, simply look for a retest on this support. And that sits, again, this is an ascending trend line. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint an exact price, but it's roughly around $2. And on X, I've been screaming, you know, around $2.20 to $2 is the base for XRP to really start picking up traction. And I think this would complete that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waves down, maybe potentially heading into early to mid-November, and then getting a large breakout where we see a 5-wave impulsive. And again, that 1618 target sits at the macro range highs, which we had on the other chart at $6.60. Now, this structure, if it is a potential bullish flag structure, I'm going to remove these charts for a second. What we've actually done here initially as well is potentially we're looking to create some sort of flipped SR. Or you could initially say that we've had this already, this sort of triangle structure, which was the flag buildup. Okay, so we've got this sort of lower highs and higher lows. And we initially go from the top of this trend back down to where the the move started. And this is how we could analyze a potential bull flag breakout target. Okay, and this already is a move that's already kickstarted into motion, and this would take XRP roughly up to $15, which is another Fibonacci extension target of mine. So, you know, I've been screaming around $13 to $27 on X for a very long time, and there's multiple patterns that are pointing towards this. However, if we get back on the previous structure that we just had, and we look at this as a potential bullish flag here, where we're just in a longer sort of period of consolidation, looking for that breakout. Again, this is very evident to see that, you know, we lost this previous level of support, which was roughly at $2.50, and right now we're running into it. So this is a bit of a struggle for XRP. It needs to get above sort of $2.50 to $2.60 in order to complete this wave. Failing that, I think another retest on support is likely before initially going for the break. Okay, but what's also giving confluence with those $27 targets? If this is the actual build up, okay, which is sort of sideways accumulation, vertical accumulation, where you've come up from this impulsive move, and right now XRP is just finding its footing before initially looking for the breakout. This target's very interesting. Going from the range high here back down to the lows, if we copy this sort of flagpole extension and we do manage to get a breakout, you will see that the actual target sits roughly at $27. So this could be a massive flagpole. This is just vertical accumulation before getting that extensive euphoria. And as I said, I think that we've got this sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wave move down. We could come towards sort of $2 again going into November before really kickstarting this jump and getting euphoric again. We have to consider, and I don't know why there's so much FUD around XRP, we have to consider where we've come from. Sort of July 2024, I do apologize for the sirens, we placed a whopping, in fact, going to the all-time high, we placed an 8x, guys. So there is no wonder we are seeing some sort of consolidation or a phase where XRP is sort of getting a cool off. And it might seem pretty frustrating, but this is, in my honest opinion, a vertical accumulation range searching for that major breakout. It's testing people's patience, yes, but as I said, you have to understand we've just had an 8x move over the last sort of year. Having this cool off period is not to be unexpected. And these large wicks for XRP also occurred in prior cycles. So if you look down here at this sort of low in March 2020, XRP had a monthly candle which drew it down roughly about 56%. If we replicate this and look at the wick of this cycle, okay, going from the top, we've literally pretty much mimicked the exact wick drawdown. Now, if we focus back here on this wick, it took 1, 2, 3, 4 months for XRP to really start kicking back into gear. And although it placed a lower high in the 2021 cycle, we had the set case on our heads, you know, there was still this nice euphoric move. So considering we've had a very similar wick drawdown, it could take 1 to 2 months. And as I said, this is potentially where XRP could come back down to roughly $2 before essentially getting that major breakout. So if we are rinse repeating something similar, I do believe XRP is in this sort of phase right now, okay, where it was in the past, rinse repeating a similar move, and we've just had that sort of, as I said, that sort of 50 to 60% drawdown, recover the price, consolidate for a few months, break out. We've had a 56% drawdown, recover the price, stay above this support level for a couple of months, then get the breakout. And again, the target in this flagpole goes up to $27. Now, simple support and resistance as well. How I managed again to get that $27 target, which coincides with this sort of structure we're looking at, is simply by going from the March 2020 low back up to the previous all-time high. And you can see the 1618 fib extension sits at $27. And you've also got the 1414 at 13. So I think $13 is very possible. In fact, we'll get the 1272 on as well, because this is the first extensive target. When XRP actually breaks this sort of all-time high that it's currently sitting under right now, the price discovery targets first sit at $8, $13, and $27. You know, so I've gone through the potential to run up to $6, maybe a healthy consolidation or pullback, and then 8, 13, and 27 are my euphoric targets for this cycle. In all honesty, I'd be happy with any of these three. But I do think double digits is highly likely given the replication that we're doing from the previous cycle. As I said, this consolidation period lasted several years for XRP, and that break was highly explosive. We then ran into the set case, which has led us to have this sort of 7-year symmetrical triangle. And now that we have this regulatory clarity, I think this is an absolute catalyst for XRP. It's made businesses and institutions, well, XRP's got the appeal. It's got the set case cleared, okay? And this is part of the reason why I think this major euphoric move actually took place. And right now, as I said, this is simply just a consolidation range of vertical accumulation where we've come up into this move. We're now consolidating in this range before getting that final extensive push to these targets. And again, anywhere between $8 to $13 to $27, in my honest opinion, is highly likely. It's highly likely. You could initially say that what we're doing is very similar again to the previous cycles, okay, where we've got this consolidation block. If we drag this over to where XRP had a previous similar consolidation block, it placed this high in May, consolidated for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months before initially getting that final push. You can see we've had the breakout and we've been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. 9 months since January 2025, other than this wick high where we actually placed the new all-time high, XRP has been trending sideways. And I think that because the new all-time high was actually confirmed this year and it didn't actually push from that and enter, you know, those euphoric targets already, and we've had this major fake out wick, this is why I think there's a lot of concern. But structurally, the integrity remains very similar. We had a massive breakout, consolidate for a large period, final blow off top. Massive breakout, consolidate for a large period, final blow off top towards sort of $15 to $27. So at the moment, I honestly have no concerns whatsoever. We sit above a previous level of support. We sit above the April 2021 highs. Just look how beautiful this is. Okay, we had this resistance. We came down. We had this ascending level of support for several years. Okay, we ran up into resistance, corrected to support, hovered on this line for several years, got the breakout, and are now healthily back testing this area for support. So this is, in my honest opinion, as I said, vertical accumulation before getting the final blow off top. It's pretty simple. As long as XRP is above its sort of April, May 2021 highs, which currently sit between sort of $1.90 to $1.60 if you're looking at the candle closes, I have no concern. So structurally, it remains intact. The bullish momentum remains intact. And I do think this is just accumulation before pushing to much higher targets. Now, we do also have something very interesting here, which is the Gaussian channel. Looking on the monthly time frame. And XRP, if we look at the 3-month time frame, there's been a very interesting area that's marked the lows for XRP. Now, this may be something for the future, but if you look at the regression bands on the Gaussian channel, we have the upper regression band here. Okay, I'll show you this in a second if it lets me actually change this to red. Thank you very much. So we had this sort of consolidation for such a long time, and you can see that the wick here in January 2017 brought XRP down to this green line. Okay, now this is the upper regression band of the Gaussian channel. This marked the low before that euphoric run. And then once we actually tapped out, you can see XRP then came back down once again to the 3-month upper regression band of the Gaussian channel. This marked the low in January 2020 for the push up to the April 21 bull market high, okay, roughly at about $2. And then once we actually corrected from that, you can see once again, we had this long-ranged period where XRP just sort of hovered on the 3-month upper regression band of the Gaussian channel. So, with this being said, if XRP can initially get this come up now, okay, if XRP can initially hold in this accumulation range and then push up to sort of $27 in that blow off top, okay, if we get that, then simply in the next bear market, look for where this Gaussian channel could be for a bear market low, for initially getting another breakout. It could be that simple. Again, you can see here that this regression band is gradually over time going to be creeping up, okay? So if we do get that explosive blow off top, then simply look for the bear market lows on this upper regression band of the Gaussian channel. And that could be anywhere from, $27 going back down to sort of $1. Yes, it would seem extremely fearful, and that would be a sort of 96% correction. But, in bear markets, this is what happens. From this all-time high in July 2013, we had a 95% correction. From this all-time high in 2018, we had a 95% correction. If we push up to $27 and get a 95% correction, guess what? It brings you back to $1, and it brings you back down to the regression band, the upper regression band of the Gaussian channel. So again, this is something for the future. but it's definitely worthwhile watching. And again, if XRP can print that target to $27, it does tie up with a 95% move from that high back down to the upper regression band of the Gaussian channel. So there's a little bit more confluence there where this run isn't done. Because if history is to repeat, the upper regression band on the 3-month has always held. And if we say we've topped out now, coming back down to it right this second would only be an 81% correction. Again, during a bear market, historically, we've seen 95 to 96. And to get that, we need to be at roughly around $27, $28 to come into that correction. So there is some correct confluence with a bear market low for pushing to $27 for the bull market high. Do you see where I'm coming from? So that's also something very important to consider here. Now, going back to this chart here on the weekly time frame. Actually, let's go back to the one we was just looking at. On the weekly time frame, okay, let's just keep it sweet and simple right this second. You can see that we have this support block, which roughly sits at about $1.80. And as I said, we also have this sort of resistance block in this sort of vertical accumulation. Okay, we have this resistance block for XRP right here. So we're technically just range bound at the moment until we get a decision. And as I said, I think the breakout's going to lead to the upside. Now, there are some indicators that are coinciding with a potential bottom nearly being placed. And one of these is the stock RSI. Okay, when the stock RSI is at levels below sort of 20, which is where we are right this second, this normally signals that a potential low is being formed. And we're in oversold territory. So being down here is a bullish signal for a potential reversal. Just like we was down here in sort of, where was we? March, April. If we get a vertical line on here and look at where this bullish cross formed and look at the price, this was the range low, okay? This was the range low on the last retracement. We did initially come up, place a higher low here or a double bottom, and then got a breakout. In fact, I think the double bottom was met to a T, okay? Which is where we had this neckline, go to the candle closes. We go to the neckline of this double bottom, and if we get a target from the neckline back down to support, where XRP initially broke out, you can see that this double bottom target was met to a T. So there's no wonder that we're actually correcting, okay? Because the breakout target was met and it ran into the range highs. So it's simple. It's pretty simple. As I said, in my honest opinion, I think this is a wave 1, this is a wave 2, this is a wave 3. We're about to, or in a wave 4, and then we could potentially get a wave 5 coming back to sort of $2, okay? Or even to this support again, which sits at $1.80. It's a possibility. It's a possibility, and it would look fearful, but as long as XRP is above this support, and as I said, as long as XRP is above its previous all-time highs, or previous highs, sorry, should I say, from last cycle, I have no concern. So the stock RSI is simply signaling to us that we're entering that oversold territory. It doesn't necessarily mean to say the bottom is already in, but it's a sign to say that being down in this territory, you can see you can hover about here for some time. It means that we're looking or closer to a low than anything else. So it's a very important thing for XRP to hold this level of support between sort of $1.80 to $2. And I think that will mark the bottom before initially pushing to $6, $8, $15, and even potentially $27. So I hope you've kind of caught the gist with me here. Several different charts, timeframes to break down. But nonetheless, the trajectory is bullish. There's been 3 major acquisitions for XRP in the last sort of couple of years. In fact, if I go to my X page and scan over a post that I shared yesterday, quickly I'll have a look and try and find it for us. On this X post, I said Ripple is cooking up a storm. Below are some of Ripple's power moves thus far in 2025. So acquisitions, you've got Hidden Road for $1.25 billion, which is a prime brokerage. You've got Rail for $200 million, which is a stablecoin payments platform. G Treasury, $1 billion for corporate treasury platform. In total, that's $2.5 billion in an immense TradFi/crypto fusion. Okay, 2.5 billion of acquisitions. There are also successful launched ETFs thus far. ProShares, Volatility Shares, Futures, ProShares Ultra, Rex Osprey Spot ETF, which also recorded a 38 million debut volume. We've got planned ETFs from Grayscale, Bitwise, 21 Shares, Wisdom Tree, Canary, Franklin Templeton, and original SEC deadlines were between October the 18th to 25th, which is today or tomorrow, but that's now been delayed due to government shutdowns in America. There's also acquired licenses, New York and Texas MTIs, money transmitter licenses, or MTL should I say. Hidden Road's FINRA broker-dealer, which was in April. However, the most important news, I always say, has to be the SEC case clearance, okay? Because without that, Ripple wouldn't have any appeal. The only reason I think, these ETFs are in place, the only reason these acquisitions are taking place, the only reason projects like Axelar and Midas are creating DeFi yield opportunities for XRP is because it has the regulatory clearance. So there's a lot going on this year, and it all points to fundamental development. Whilst XRP has been consolidating pretty much since January. Okay, so nearly, nine months XRP has been consolidating for. So since 2025, all of that bullish news has been happening in this cluster. And you think it's going to lead to a breakdown? Do you think this is the end? I think this is the end of the beginning. So again, I honestly think we're about to send into the stratosphere. And this isn't everything as well. This is just a few of the bullish power moves thus far in 2025. So in my honest opinion, I think that we are looking for continuation here for XRP. And this range will break viciously to the upside. And again, just simple charting here. Okay, we're in a vertical accumulation range. You could call this some sort of flag for a long time. And again, getting that breakout of this level of resistance gives us those targets towards sort of $27. Okay, and we've got confluence with the stock RSI being in the floor. There's confluence with the 3-month Gaussian channel, which I showed you guys before. Having a correction back down now would only be an 85%, whereas in previous bear market corrections, it's always 95% plus. So it doesn't make sense to be in a bear market low right now. It really doesn't. And in fact, to be in a bear market, should I say, or even entering one. In fact, even looking at the previous candle close highs here, XRP remains above the candle close highs or previous candle close highs from 2018 at around $1.90. You can see that these candles have been floating above this for some time. We haven't actually had a candle close below the prior all-time high from January 2018 since October 2024. So there is, what's all the fuss about? XRP is holding above a key level of support, consolidating, in my honest opinion, waiting for that final blow off top of about another 9 to 10x. Okay, I think is highly doable. People talk about market cap. Alt season has no care for market cap. It has no care for market cap whatsoever. Okay, and with the institutional adoption, the interest, the inflows, the regulatory clarity, after 7 years of consolidating, in my honest opinion, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. Now, one thing you could argue is looking at this monthly stock RSI for XRP, okay, which did place a sort of death cross in July 2025. Now, this is a lagging indicator. I do think that this death cross in July has also tied up with confluence with this large wick. Okay, and we have seen, as witnessed over the last sort of few months, a rough sort of 56 to 60% correction. Now, yes, it's a concerning signal and it needs monitoring, but on other time frames, the macro time frames, the trend is still our friend. We haven't lost any key structure and we're resetting, okay, on the weekly. So in my honest opinion, the Gaussian channel is quite interesting here as well on the weekly, actually. You can see that the wick actually came down to the lower regression band. The last time XRP retraced to its lower regression band was in July 2024. And this is what led to that major euphoria. XRP recently had a wick down to the lower regression band of the Gaussian channel in October. Flush the weak hands? It seems so. So I genuinely have no concerns as long as XRP is above the April 2021 high and is currently consolidating in this phase, looking for a marker. In fact, the middle regression band sits at $1.93. If we can't break above the upper regression band right here, which currently sits at around $2.50, and I said to you guys already, $2.50 is a key level of resistance because it was resistance in the past on this double bottom for the break to the new all-time high. We've actually lost that previous level of resistance that we was trying to hold as support, and we're hitting our heads on it. So if we do see a potential rollover to create that final fifth wave, look for around $1.90. Which is where the middle regression band is, and also where the support is that XRP has been holding since December 2024. So again, I'm getting a bit carried away here, guys, but you kind of get the gist. There's a ton of support below. XRP's been holding or hovering around it for about a year. There's been fantastic news and developments, regulatory clarity, interest, institutional adoption. In my honest opinion, the run is not over, and XRP will push to double digits. Nothing that I say is financial advice. I hope you've enjoyed the content. From Chart Nerd TA, take care. Peace out.